Hello, everybody. Welcome to Afems virtual healing circle with Mmatshilo Motsei, Healing as a Revolutionary Act. We're so excited that you're joining us today on September 10th. We had planned to have our conference in August, but thanks to COVID, we're all at home and going virtual. I would like to hand over to Polo Moji, who is going to introduce herself and the rest of the Afems committee, who've been working very hard to plan today with for all of us, and who are continuing to work hard to make sure that we do have Afems face-to-face next year, should the restrictions allow. Handing over to you, Polo.
Sorry, that was me muted. We are so pleased to have everybody here today. We've been working on this. It has kept us going in the middle of lockdown. And we just felt that we needed something to hold the Afems community together at this time, given that the conference had been postponed to 2021. So I'm going to introduce the members of the Afems organizing committee, who will also be organizing the conference next year. Many of you know them, know Shelley and Linda Spencer, who have been running with this Afems conference for years now. So please just say hello, Linda. Just wave, Linda, Charlene. Can I also introduce, if you can put on your video briefly, Karnita and Mandisa, who is now, looks like me, but is not me because of the picture. Mandisa, could you put your video on? And Mandisa is, of course, our chair for today. And without further ado, I am going to hand over to Mandisa, who will take you through the program.
All right. So first up, we are going to have a fun, exciting, icebreaker, and it's going to be a poll icebreaker, and I hope that all of you will participate. And our program for today is going to start off with the icebreaker, followed by Mmatshilo Motsei's presentation, and Mmatshilo will be introduced by Barbara Boswell. And then after that, we are going to have a Q&A session. And after the Q&A session, we're going to showcase films by young student artists, as well as an invited guest, Jaliya the bird, as well as Shelley Berry. After that, we are going to go into a Q&A session that should be fun. So we'll send everybody into automated breakout rooms, and we trust that you'll get to see each other's faces in that space and interact. And we're going to give you a prompt to engage with together. When we return from the breakout rooms, we'll have a final, shared space. And then during that time, we can open up everybody's videos and we can just engage with one another, closing and enjoy a Afems wind down, which should be amazing and fun. So we look forward to that. So all right, next up, I am going to introduce my colleague, Barbara Boswell. Barbara Boswell is a feminist literary scholar with interest in Black diasporic women's writing, Black South African women's literature, and queer theory. She earned a PhD in gender and women's studies from the University of Maryland, College Park in 2010, after joining the Department of Women's Studies as a Fulbright Scholar. Her MPhil was completed at the Women's and Gender Studies program at the University of Cape Town. Barbara has taught South African literature, feminist theory, and representations of race and gender at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and the University of Virginia, where she was an ACLS postdoctoral fellow at the Carter G. Woodson Institute for African American and African Studies. She has also taught in the English department of the University of Witwatersrand and in gender studies at the University of Cape Town and the University of the Western Cape. Her recently published book, it just came out, and Wrote My Story Anyway, examines the ways in which Black South African women writers engaged with nationalisms during and after apartheid in their fiction. She is an editorial board member of the literary journal Scrutiny 2, as well as a board member of the feminist journal Agenda. Barbara has co-edited special issues of journals on Loretta Ngcobo's literary legacy and women's participation in student movements. She is also the author of Grace, a novel, published in 2017 by Mojaji Books. Her book, and Wrote My Story Anyway, is published by Wits Press, and they will be having a book launch on September 30th, so look out for that. Welcome, Barbara Boswell.
Hi, thank you, Mandisa, for that warm welcome. As usual, I just had a little panic and couldn't locate my unmute button, so I hope everyone can hear me and see me. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much to the Afems committee for producing this much needed intervention at this time, I think, when we are all tired and feeling different levels of just being tired with the state of the world, and also the fight against gender-based violence and oppression just doesn't end. I want to thank Polo Moji, Mandisa Harhoff, Karnita Mohammed, my colleagues at UCT, and also Charlene Khan and Linda Spencer for persevering in order to bring us this intervention, this webinar today, Healing as the Revolutionary Act. And now it is such a great honor and privilege for me to introduce Mmatshilo Motsei. I was thinking of ways in which to talk about which is really difficult. For me, she is a visionary, a thinker, an artist, creator, healer, activist, feminist, womanist, warrior, scholar, leader, and I could go on and on with these superlatives and descriptors of an amazing human being who I think, when I think of her, really what stands out for me is that she carries this enormous light within her and around her, which she shines and uses for social justice, for making us aware of the shackles of oppression that is all around us, and for healing us all from the effects of those terrible systems of oppression such as racism, sexism, colonialism, homophobia, and the damage that is wrought by capitalism every day around the globe. As someone who is here representing, I suppose, a literary studies department and as also a feminist, I'm going to just start this introduction by focusing on the books, because this is the way in which I was introduced to Motsei. The first book that I read by her is a book called Hearing Visions, Seeing Voices. She has two other books published, The Kanga and the Kangaroo Court, Reflections on the Rape Trial of Jacob Zuma, and Reweaving the Soul of the Nation. I first encountered Ms. Motsei's amazing teaching and activism and feminist praxis through the book Hearing Visions, Seeing Voices. And this is a book about which I can confidently say this book changed my life. This book gave me a model for blending a kind of personal praxis of looking at my spirit as a whole, looking and integrating my spirituality with feminist activism, and working towards eradicating gender injustice in the world. Motsei in this book details how a spiritual calling came to her and how heeding that calling developed her into a truly actualized, liberated woman who was then able to offer that same profound gift to other women and men and non-binary people. Another book which is very important to me is The Kanga and the Kangaroo Court, Reflections on the Rape Trial of Jacob Zuma. And this book, I'm very proud to say, has become part of our decolonial curriculum on African feminist thought at the University of Cape Town, where it is part of our curriculum in the postgraduate studies. This book is an incisive, heartbreaking, and devastatingly clear analysis of the scourge of rape in this country and globally. And Motsei in this book makes all sorts of connections between the intimate, global capitalism, the military-industrial complex, and how all of these systems are overlapping and reinforce each other when it comes to oppressing women violently, sexually. This book, I've had the privilege of seeing how this book impacts students and how it affects their thinking and indeed is able to change lives. And I'm always very, very grateful and excited to be able to teach it, even though it deals with incredibly difficult subject matter. Her third book then is Reweaving the Soul of the Nation, a collection of essays on African spirituality, politics, feminism, and the intersections of those three. Motsei is also a poet and has published her poetry in Setswana and English. And this is available in a volume called Sesedi Whirlwind. So I've touched on the writing, but this is just a very small portion of Motsei's contribution. She's a spiritual coach. She is an indigenous knowledge practitioner. She specialized in midwifery and has worked as a nurse, has studied psychology, and has been a social science researcher and rural development facilitator. And her healing feminist praxis integrates all of these modalities in which she's trained and which she draws on and gives it that extra spiritual dimension, looking at human beings not only as flesh, but also as the spiritual beings whose spirits have been profoundly damaged by racism, colonialism, sexism, and whose spirits need to be healed also, in addition, for freedom to be found. She worked for over 10 years as the founding director of Agisanang Domestic Abuse Prevention and Training, ADAPT, which I think later, I was listening to a podcast this morning, became the Alexandra Domestic Abuse Prevention and Training Project in the Alexandra Township in Johannesburg. And this is where she started working, or where she worked with women who were domestic abuse survivors, but also brought men along because she believes, and this I think, reading her writing and seeing what she's doing in workshop settings, she's determined to bring men along with women in the fight against the scourge of gender-based violence, because I think she is led by a belief that men also need healing, and that in healing men, we can heal a lot of the systems that enable domestic violence, gender-based violence, and other acts of gender violence, such as sexual violence. Ms. Motsei is also involved as a co-founder of the Chwananang Legal Advocacy for Women project based in Johannesburg. So she has, in addition to working with women, been instrumental then in involving men in part of the solution to violence against women. Also then, as an Indigenous knowledge producer, an artist, a life story writer, and a feminist spiritual coach, she's also a scholar and currently is registered for a PhD in sociology at the University of Pretoria, focusing on obstetric violence with the view to challenging feminist erasure of indigenous midwifery and in engaging in a critique of the medicalization of childbirth. And so we see in her feminist project also a very profound concern with indigenous knowledge and restoring feminist, womanist practices and knowledge that have been erased in this very violent world in which we live. She is the founding director of Africa Ikalefa Center of Spirituality and Health. And this word or term means Africa Heal Thyself. And the center serves as an invitation for Africa to challenge the lie of its inferiority and powerlessness. Now, if that list of accomplishments, achievements, and acts of service is not enough, there's one other thing I want to emphasize. In 2013, she undertook a 7-day climb of Mount Kilimanjaro to raise funds for an orphans project in Maviljan village in Bushbuck Ridge, in Mpumalanga. So there's much more that I could say. I am a huge fan of your work. I have been wanting to do your workshop conversations with my womb for a long time, and time has not allowed. And so I consider myself and all of us gathered here extremely fortunate to be having this opportunity today, even though it's via webinar. We use what we have in order to do what we need to do. Thank you. So I'm grateful, Ms. Motsei, for your presence. I'm grateful for your power, your profound service, and your light. And I welcome you into. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I think that long introduction is a bit intimidating, but I'll try and catch my breath. I am going to speak for about 20 minutes, and then I think the best of what I want to offer will come in the question and answer session. To start off with, the topic is healing. It's speaking about two words, healing and revolution. Healing is different from health. Healing is different from curing. When you heal something, you reconcile what might seem to be irreconcilable. When you heal something, you bring together two entities or more that may seem like cannot coexist. And all of us have got those entities in us. I always refer to what Mphahlele used to say, that by virtue of having been colonized, we have split personalities. So all of these split personalities that we carry within us are brought together through a process of healing. Another word, obviously, to reflect on a bit is revolution, which comes from revolt. And when you think about the word revolt, it brings you to another word, rebel. What are we rebelling against? What are we revolting against? I think this is a question that I would like to pose for each one of us, that each one can think about your life as it is now. Are you a rebel of any sorts? Are you engaged in a rebellion, in a revolution? And what are you rebelling against? But in your revolution, Are you also seeking healing? Are you also finding a way of bringing together the split personalities that are within you, split personalities that are in our communities, in the country, in the world? So this is essentially what healing and revolution, the interface of healing and revolution brings to us. So I come to this space basically this afternoon to share my journey of vulnerability. And I focus a lot on vulnerability because the thing about healing is that it makes you softer. As feminists, when we came out of a private space, you know, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, up to now, when we came out of that private jail, which was a private space, it was important for us to come out with rage and anger. We needed rage to bring down the walls. We needed that fire to bring down the walls. And I'm saying this not that we don't have any need for fire now. Life, as we all know, is such that when you get to a certain point of an enlightenment, I almost wanted to use the word freedom, but then maybe not, because I think we achieve freedom when we die, you know, because all of our lives, there's always something that we are struggling with. So I come to this space with vulnerability, and I carry vulnerability with ease. Because for me, vulnerability is a reminder of that rage that I carried, this rage that I carry sometimes, but not all the time. And when it does come up, I carry it as well, I engage with it. But the most important thing when we talk about healing and revolution is make sure that we work towards transforming the world in a way that enhances life, in a way that is life enhancing. Many of us, you know, from the history of revolutions all over the world, especially political revolutions, people have died. And those who have not died physically, there's also quite a lot of people who have died mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So I'm reminding all of us that healing and revolution is about transformation. And when you look at the word transformation and you break it into two, one of the things that I really like quite a lot is breaking words down. And when I break them down, that's when I understand their meaning better. So transform. So basically what that means is that it's about transforming. It's about going beyond form. And going beyond form means when you have transformed, which is what healing is about, when you have transformed, you are not in the same form anymore. There's something about you that has changed. And the two metaphors that comes to mind for me in terms of transform is a metaphor of a butterfly that is about to come off a cocoon. And then I wonder when the cocoon starts cracking up, I wonder if the butterfly experiences fear. And of course, maybe it tells itself that it's the end of my life, only to find that when the cocoon breaks, it starts flying. Another metaphor that I would like to share about transform is a serpent, a snake that sheds its skin. And the amazing thing about a snake that sheds its skin is that when it crawls there and you look at it, you wouldn't be able to identify that it's no longer carrying the old skin. And essentially, this metaphor describes where I was in the past few years and where I am now. Some of you may know about, as Barbara has said that I wrote the book Kanga and the Kangaroo Court. And then writing that book at that time threw me into a place of isolation. And I practically moved homes more than almost every year. And most of the time I was evicted because of not having any source of income and source of livelihood. And so at the end of that period of isolation, I spent 2 years on a farm alone in Mmatshilo. And that's actually where the idea of conversations with my womb was birthed. But before I tell you about how this was birthed, is to say, when you heal, when you transform, when you change, you're not always aware of what you are changing into. You're not always aware of who you are becoming. Sometimes you might meet yourself in a place where you don't expect to meet yourself. You might be surprised about how you react to something and to find that you react differently. And in that period where I stayed alone in Mmatshilo in the mountain, there were times when I actually did not see people. I never spoke to anyone. I spent time in stillness and solitude. And when I came out, one of my greatest fears was, how do I speak my truth now that I am not the same person anymore? How do I then step into the world now that my rage is gone? How do I explain the fact that I see the world now with a different eye? And how do I even talk about love in a society that is still immersed in rage, rightfully so, because there is so much violence happening? So for some time, I kind of lied low because I knew who I am now, but I had not found the words yet. I didn't have the language of who I am now. And a few interviews that I did when I came out were like a complete mess because I was operating from a place of softness and stillness. And in my head, I guess, I was still feeling, I was still carrying the notion of softness as a form of weakness. So I guess I'm that serpent that has come out with a different skin, but when you look at me, you can't tell that I'm wearing a different skin. So I had a lot of fears about coming out and speaking. But now I don't want to say I'm not afraid. Maybe let's say that I know how to ride my fears, surf them like a surfer who's riding the waves. I think that's what it is. I live with my fear. I live with my weaknesses. I live with my vulnerabilities very openly. And the other day I was thinking, I cannot do the kind of healing work that I do if I'm not vulnerable myself. I cannot do the work that I'm doing if I'm not comfortable with being in a place of vulnerability. And this also brings me to the work that I do with men. Most of the work that I do comes to me either, you know, when I'm in nature outside. That's how a project or an idea will come to me, or some of it comes through dreams. And I'll speak briefly about the work that I do with men. I'm working on a project now called Mokolobate, which literally means, you know, putting the spears down. And that project is essentially focusing on an exploration and a search for African indigenous ways of responding to the spiritual wound of sexual violence. And that came to me in a dream as well. And again, I was afraid to do the work because every time when I told people about Mokolobate, the question would be, but do you think that men can change? Or do you think that men will heal? And I'm doing my work with men, not so much for them, but for me. I'm doing this kind of work, firstly, because it's what I'm born to do. It's part of my calling. But I'm also doing it because it's part of my own healing. I carry the fractured masculine inside of me. I'm a product of patriarchy. Therefore, there are times when I see the world with an eye of a patriarch, a very like dominant and toxic patriarch. So I'm doing this work for my own healing. And also, it's also important for us to recognize that it's okay for each of us to be operating from a different plane, from a different planetary energy. One of the questions that you asked in the icebreaker is, would you, about balancing your chakras? It reminds me of a podcast that I did last week. The person who interviewed me, Buhle, said, is it okay to even talk about healing when the country is on fire? And the example that she gave was, I just feel that it's selfish for me to be balancing my chakras when I should be out on a march. And my answer to that was, why do we even separate that? Because, as we know, Older Order told us that there is no such a thing as a single issue struggle. So it's okay for us to operate at different energies. And it's okay for us inside of ourselves that you can balance your chakras, but still be out on a march and express rebellion and rage. And therefore, I'm much more of an end person. For me, life is not either or. So my search in my work of healing is, how can I maximize the end? What else can I do? Can I add this in addition to what is already in existence? So that's essentially, what is driving my work right now. And how did I end up with conversations with my womb? One of the things that I used to do a lot when I was on a farm in Mmatshilo, it was a beautiful place. It had it had a stream that is running through it. It had a cave, and it was quite massive. And I used to just wake up in the morning and listen to the voice inside of me, because I mean, the voice is the one that heals, essentially. I'm just a medium. So the voice would tell me to go to a particular corner of the farm in a gorge. And then I would be walking down the gorge alone. I would discover a waterfall, and not discover it in the same way that David Livingstone and all these other missionaries say they've discovered Africa or whatever. I would discover a waterfall. I would like find a cave. And one time I went into the spot, which ultimately became like my church. I don't go to church, so I literally, when I go to church, mostly is when I'm in nature. So I went to the spot and I found a tree trunk that looks like half of the body of a woman. 2 legs were sprawled out, and that place, which looks like a vulva, the meeting point of the 2 legs, was charred with fire. And this is where the idea of starting conversations with my womb was planted in a way. And I then started to do healing circles in 2017. And when I speak about conversations with my womb, obviously we're not only focusing on the physical womb, we're also focusing on the metaphysical womb. And I use African proverbs quite a lot in my healing circles. If we then think about the word womb in Setswana is called popelo. And popelo comes from a verb which means hobopa. Hobopa is to create. And to bopa you use mopa, which is clay. So conversations with my womb is an opportunity or a call for us to create the world that we want our great-grandchildren to live in. And as women, we are the best creators of this world, because we've come to a time in the world where the divine feminine is called upon to rise. But the divine feminine cannot rise, cannot heal, cannot recreate the world if we, the mediums and custodians of that planetary energy, are broken. To be able to effectively recreate the world, we need to heal our brokenness. All of us carry the wounds of being born female in the society. One of the things that inspired me as well, which has relevance to the work that I do with men and women, is that at some point I was working with an old man who's a healer in Limpopo. And when he did the divination, he said to me, something happened to you when you were 6 years old, and until you heal it, you'll never be happy. And at that time, he didn't know that I was raped when I was 6. And I grew up, even did all the work on violence against women, without knowing, or I had repressed the fact that I was raped at 6. And that memory came when I was writing Kanga in the Kangaroo Court. And I went into deep therapy at that point because, you know, the whole experience took me on a total spin. I went to deep therapy. It helped, but not so much, because there's a limit in terms of how colonial intervention strategies can help us as African people to get to the roots of our problem, because what Western interventions do, they focus on the what, maybe the symptoms, the what, but then how do you heal the what if you don't know the why? So African indigenous healing helps us to understand the why. And it was through a process of divination with an old man in Venda where I told him about, you know, having been raped when I was 6. And in that moment, he told me about ancient African interventions that were used to heal the spiritual wound of sexual violence. If you look at it now, we carry broken DNAs from all kinds of violations, from all kinds of abuses, from all kinds of harassment, you know, from within ourselves, because the abuser also is within us, within our relationships, our families, our workplaces, political homes, religious homes, everywhere. We carry those wounds just by virtue of the fact that we were born female. Or maybe to say that spirit chose to incarnate in a body of a woman. So conversations with my womb starts there. It starts from us reflecting on our brokenness, and then from there, then we heal. We basically are called upon through healing to birth a new world. And this is not making excuses for patriarchy. The healing cycles that I do with men are not making excuses for patriarchy, because healing cannot happen if you don't take responsibility for your thoughts, for your beliefs, for your actions. So it's a 7-week online course. We start with our conditioning as girls and as women. We look at healing the mother wound, and a lot of pain comes out of healing the mother wound. And within that, there's also opportunities for birth stories. It's been amazing for me to see adult women going back to their mothers to ask their mothers questions about how was I born, and even looking at the birth traumas. So there's also a session on healing the father wound, and healing the father wound is mainly around an act of commission or omission. And that also is a big wound of reconnecting with the masculine inside of us. And then we talk about the womb as a carrier of life, our a perception of the woman's body, especially menstruation, a perception of, you know, the vagina, vulva, all of that. And then we also look at the womb as a carrier of pain. And here we focus on healing the multi-generational wounds, mainly of sexual violence. And let me end by saying that we end on by looking at self-love, which is like such a word that we throw around a lot. But we look at love, self-love. And interestingly, most people often say that when I'm in a healing circle with them, when we start looking at what we mean when we talk about self-love, people end up saying that I actually don't know what you're talking about. And finally, in the last week, we talk about the goddess inside of us. Of course, we live in a society where the feminine face of God has been suppressed for centuries, and we can't heal the womb without rebirthing the feminine face of God. So in a sense, that's part of my journey, and it's also, you know, a summary of what we do in conversations with my womb. And if you ask me, I feel that the next phase of our liberation is calling on us to heal as part of the revolution. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Mmatshilo. That was incredibly powerful, and I am so glad that we have you here to share such an insightful concept as Conversations with Our Womb, and concept of revolutionary healing that engages both the political, the personal, the body, the metaphysical, the spiritual. I love what you said about the fractured is not in itself fractured, but is very much a sense of completeness in ourselves, and it's dealing and addressing all the fractured parts of ourselves that are necessary for healing and that are necessary for revolution. We are going to enter into the Q&A session now, and I will be chairing it. Wanjiru is still taking questions. So far, we have just one question. So I'm going to go ahead and pose that question. And please, if you have any more questions for Mmatshilo, send them through. I'm going to set a timer for 20 minutes, so we have spaciousness. So please send your questions through. Mmatshilo, are you ready for the first question? Okay, I'll take.
I'm ready.
Okay, cool, wonderful. All right, so the question is, can Mmatshilo explain her thinking about gendered binaries and trans women in all of this?
Okay. I'm going to start by saying the thing about gendered binaries is that first thing to accept is that feminists of my generation do not necessarily have the language for that. And that's why in my case, you know, there's this song that every generation has its own revolution. So there is a need for intergenerational dialogue where young women who are expressing an expansive definition of freedom and liberation, the part that my generation did not touch upon, that's where young feminists have to lead. So when you are operating in a place of spirit, difference does not count. It is present, but it can't be used to exclude. I used a word earlier, I said, we carry wounds by virtue of having been born female. So non-conforming people carry wounds because of spirit having chosen to incarnate in bodies of queer people or non-binary. So that is how I approach it. I am in a conversation with a young queer woman who has experienced abuse 2 days ago, who is based in a village in Northwest. So you can imagine the challenge of being queer in a village in Northwest, and how much violence you will experience. So she and I are currently working on a proposal for her to lead that. There's certain aspects of the liberation that cannot be led by my generation of feminists. But having said that, all of us are wounded healers in one form or another. And thank you for someone who has raised it. We are wounded healers in one form or another. And I can think of a proverb in Setswana that says, "Thuto kgolo e tswa lebading." You are the one who knows it, who feels it. So you are the best person, not only to describe and explain it, but you are the best person to lead it. So that is essentially how I view this.
Thank you, Mmatshilo. Our second question is, where can, actually this one can wait to the end. Where can we access Conversations with My Womb? That can come in the end. The next question is, okay. Can Mmatshilo expand on how she incorporates men/masculinities in her sessions on healing? This person just needs to know how men can get involved in the healing sessions in terms of the balancing of male and female energies in our society.
Okay, at the moment, there's two separate programs for men and women. The healing program for women is the Conversations with My Womb, which I have explained. But the healing circle for men is Marumo Fatsi, which I also, kind of explained earlier. How this will run, how Marumo Fatsi runs is that I facilitate healing circles for men. They also go through the same process of reflecting on their own conditioning, the messages that they have been told when they were growing up as boys, and how those messages still impact on the choices and decisions that they make now as adults. And here I am inspired a lot by my own father. I always like to tell the story of, I was raised by a very gentle human being, but because he was a man, he did not have the license to be vulnerable. The society did not give him permission to break down and fall apart. If you know African proverbs, you can think of all kinds of African proverbs that reinforces that. And whenever he felt heavy emotionally, he would say, "I feel like I could cry." When he said that, I knew that inside he's crying. So in the conditioning, we look at that. We look at also healing the father wound and healing the mother wound for men. And also then look at all forms of violence that they subject to others and the violences that has been subjected to them. So it's essentially reflecting on that. But the end of Marumo Fatsi comes when we invite women who had been abused to tell their story. Because when it comes to healing in African cosmology, the African cosmology calls for the divine feminine to be the one that leads, the one that acts as intermediary between the spiritual and the earthly realm. So what happens then is that at the end of the ceremony is led by 3 old women, where men will do a series of fire and water rituals in the presence of 3 old women. And I can tell you, one of the questions that I ask, usually when I do workshops with men, it's about 3 days. First day, a lot of men are angry that, the workshop is even facilitated by a woman. Second day, we're a little bit on speaking terms. But on a third day, we're on good terms because we have unpacked stuff. And one of the first questions that I asked them on the third day is, how many of you have raped a woman? Usually, there will be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 who will raise their hands. And from that point, then we go into an intense discussion of what is sexual consent. And during a discussion on sexual consent, there are many who will come up at that point to say, I have raped. So now, when the broken masculine stands up and comes up and says, I have perpetrated this, I have done this. What do you do if you're operating from the place of divine feminine? And this is what the rituals then are all about. This is where the rituals come in terms of like reconciling the masculine, what I call the sacred integration of the sacred feminine and masculine. But integration is also not like an end in itself. It's ongoing. It's a process that has to continue. As an example, I've got a request right now from a young man who called me to say he raped a friend a few years ago, and he says he's unable to get on with his life and he needs help. Initially, when he consulted me, the idea was for me to help healing, reconciliation between him and the woman that he has raped. And I said, it's fine, but you must also understand that the woman may not want anything to do with you. And it's true that was the case. So when he came back to say, I managed to trace her, I tracked her down, she doesn't want anything to do with me. So then she then said, what I need now for me, my healing is no longer around just the rape. What I need now for me to work with you, right from the time when I was a young boy, I want to understand for myself, how did I end up having this kind of perception of women and womanhood? So that's essentially the journey that we're starting now. I don't heal. I mean, I'm not really a healer. I think what I do is listen to people. I hold people's hands when they go through their journey of healing. So this is the first time I'm getting on a journey like this with a man who is wanting help. And I think it will be interesting to see how it's going to come out, because in the past I've just done work with in groups. So how can people access? At the moment, from the 1st of October, I'm going to be running conversations with my womb, and I normally in between want to wait a bit. And I think the circle on Marumo Fatse, which is Healing Circle for Men, will probably start early 2021. But we are in the process right now as Africa Kalafe to run a few conversations with men during 16 days of activism, which is also to showcase what we mean by Marumo Fatse, because most of the time when I talk about this, the indigenous way of responding to the spiritual wound of sexual violence. I think I feel like people don't really understand what I'm talking about. So maybe I feel that we need to do something to show. So for 16 days, we'll be running conversations with men. And I'm also in the process of putting together a website. You must understand that I've been a reluctant healer as well. I've been coming out and hiding, because of what I explained to you in the beginning, that I was that serpent which no longer have the same skin, but I was afraid to come out. But now, as I have explained, I know how to ride my fear. So I'm creating a home, a website where people can access this work. And I think in a month or so, it will be available.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mmatshilo. You shared so expansively on what your process is in terms of healing with men, healing circles with men, as well as how people can access conversations with my womb. And I hope you can share a link with us for how people can sign up, because there is a lot of interest. So thank you so much for that. We have 2 more questions and about 7 minutes to answer them before we move on to our films. All right, the second question is, how do we deal with the guilt that comes with accepting healing and letting go of rage, when for so long rage has fueled revolution and rebellion and helped fight for women? And then I'll ask the last question so you can cover both of them.
Okay.
Yes, okay. So the last question is, a male friend who is a Sangoma has mentioned that what we need to do is start rites of passage ceremonies around families, understanding that the female in the new generation is the leader for healing and for holding the space of the family, thus community with buy-in from males. What is your perspective on this?
Okay, the first question, one of the powerful ways in which we are silenced, mainly as women, but as people, is guilt. And that comes from, religion. And here I'm talking about organized religion. Organized religion survives, thrives on us feeling guilty about all kinds of things all the time. And we shouldn't feel guilty about being angry. And I said earlier, I am more of an end person, and rage is necessary because we are fighting different battles every day. So rage is like, fire that you need to do something about your oppression, to do something about where you are wounded, to do something about where you're hooked. Each and every one of us has got an aspect of oppression that we are dealing with. There's some place in our lives where we are hooked, where we are struggling. And also, each of us experience all kinds of violations wherever we are. So rage cannot not be there when you are violated. We need it. We need rage. And I think most of the time when I speak about love and the approach that I use in my work, it might seem like I'm saying people must no longer be enraged. Once we stop being enraged, we are dead. It means then that we allow oppression to bury us. So the link, the kind of letting go of rage happens when you are ready only with regard to a specific form of oppression. You might not be ready to let go of rage in another kind of oppression. So it's not like it's a blanket thing that needs to happen that to show that you have healed, then you are no longer angry. And to the second question, rites of passage, yeah, true, and that's why this is what I'm trying to recreate in my work on Marumofatsi. It's basically all of my work, because when I'm working on healing multi-generational wounds of sexual violence, we literally go to, I still have access to the gorge in Machadodor. We literally still go there and we immerse ourselves in water. And the rituals are the same. Women will also go through a fire ritual where you burn perhaps the clothes that you were wearing when you were raped. And then this will be followed by a water ritual. And when you are surrounded by other women who have journeyed, who have been through the same wound that you have been through, then that's basically how we do rites of passage. And it's important for us to create new rites of passage for the 21st century, because what I'm finding, especially in my work on indigenous midwifery, something that makes me very sad is that a lot of our elders are gone. I mean, sometimes I make an appointment to go and meet an elder, and when I try and reach them a few weeks later, she's no longer there. So our libraries are going, but I'm of the opinion that the knowledge is in our DNA. The more we heal is the more we open space for the knowledge to be channeled through us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mmatshilo. That was incredibly amazing. There are so many comments all through the chat about the immense gratitude that everybody has for every insight you've offered today and the kind of the healing circle that this is. So we're going to continue forward. That's my timer. We're going to continue forward to the videos now. So I want to send a thank you to Mmatshilo. At the end, we are going to open the screens up for everybody to just give a big show of gratitude. But for now, Mmatshilo, I would like to invite you to go off video as we go on to the next thing. Thank you so much. Next up, we have our art showcase, which will be a set of 3 short films. I will start off by introducing the first film, which is by Jaliya the Bird. It's called Idol Worship. And I will first introduce Jaliya and then go ahead and show her film. And then we'll introduce the next person, the set of 3 students, show their film, Gemoto, and then we'll introduce Shelley Berry, and then show her film. And after that, we'll segue onto our breakout rooms. Thank you so much for participating in the Q&A as well. Jaliya the Bird is a writer, poet, performer, born in Angola, raised in South Africa. The artist creates intercessions, unspoken words, which is provoking, celebrating, releasing emotion and thought through storytelling, writing, poetry, and performance art. The work explores womanhood, Blackness, Pan-Africanism, with a focus on freedom and authenticity, living life from the core of who we are as we respond to the causes that move us. This is Idol Worship by Jaliya the Bird.
For women who didn't know that their submission was subjugation, didn't see that their service was servitude, they bowed until they kowtowed and turned mere men into God. For women who got tired of waiting, and so they rested. Yet they slept by themselves as absence was with them. For we who slept lonely when they were absent. For we who slept lonely while they slept next to us. For the women who expected much and were told to hush. For women who did everything they could, even what they couldn't do. The sheets choking and taunting. The bed whispering back the threats of what it would be like if they ever left. Men who promised to leave at the slight suspicion that these women would live if given the chance to come alive. And so they chained their lives, whispering lies like, you are nothing without me. For women who were too afraid to start again. For we who got caged in the arms of lovers who held us, not to embrace us, but to define us, not for comfort, but for fun. For women who were desperate. For women whose only prayers were tears, whose intercessions were sobs, and the mumbling, the rumbling of the unrest in their souls. For we who have battered souls from the assault of their words, words that hit like a hammer, we stood firm, although we were falling and swallowed insult after insult, accusations and allegations, words that ripped us and ripped us, wrenched our hearts and broke us up, stripped us naked, left us bare, shamed us until we ourselves. For women who were too ashamed of bruises they did not create. For we who learned to apologize, nursed our wounds with lullabies until they slept and made us forget that these men put their hands on us. And our sores awaken when these men put their hands on us again. This is for the eternal anger that has caused the outrage that made us promise to destroy everything in our way. Oh, this is for the eternal anger that has caused the outrage that made us destroy everything in our way. For women who once had, who sacrificed themselves in the name of God, who died in the name of God, women who in the name of God. For strong women who love weak. For priceless women who never knew their worth. For women who gave their hearts, gave their souls, gave their bodies to men who still break them. Gave to men who stole from them. For women that love men who didn't love them. This is for we who gave of ourselves until there was nothing left to give. For women who watched them leave, saw them go, and put an end to it all. Now you can begin. Now you can begin.
Next up, we have Buhle, Siwendu, Isang, and Philiswa. Their film is called Kamoto. Buhle Siwendu is an artist and teacher by profession. Siwendu's work focuses on the female body and notions of identity, appreciation, and cultural relation in South Africa. Siwendu holds a BTech in Fine Art from Walter Sisulu and honors in art history and postgraduate certificate in education from Rhodes University. Isang Mokolobate is a visual artist who specializes in mixed media drawings and digital prints. He holds a diploma in fine and applied arts from the Tshwane University of Technology. In the past decade, Mokolobate has worked as a qualified videographer and video editor for SuperSport company channels and Kwese. Philiswa Lila is a visual artist, curator, and scholar fascinated by the socially relevant and timely issues of authorship and agency. Lila holds and honors in curatorship from UCT and a BTech in Fine Art and Applied Arts from TUT. Her materials of choice include animal skin, that is sheep, goat, and cow, beading, wood, paper, canvas, and video. Some of her ongoing projects explore individual experiences as recognizable or familiar narratives to collective frameworks of culture, mainly in isiXhosa, but also aware of the interconnectedness of cultures in South Africa. Lila has become the 2018 recipient of the prestigious Gerald Sekoto Award, which included a residency at the Site Internationale des Arts in Paris. The artworks produced in Paris are in her debut solo exhibition entitled Skin, Bone, Fire, the first album, which was first hosted by the APSA Gallery and will be touring to various venues in South Africa. Through her representation with the Melrose Gallery, Dr. Esther Mahlangu selected Lila as an artist to watch for the 2019 Seed Auction. Lila is represented by the Melrose Gallery. This is Kamoto by Buhle, Isang, and Philiswa.
Kimoto. Do not mistake my beautiful dark form for a shadow. Dinesithunzi.
Unalisiriti.
Singabantu.
I am the celestial essence that flows from the words of a loving God.
Enkosi.
Enkosi. Enkosi.
Ungumntu.
In me
is
the womb to birth nations.
Kibuphilo.
Kibuphilo. I am life.
Kibuphilo.
Dim namuntu.
In the depths of my eyes, you will find pools of infinite patience. Gilerato. I am love.
I am love.
I'm love.
Gilerato. Ewe singabantu.
I think abundance into being, and I speak beauty into my existence.
I am sound.
I am sound. I, Dimhlesana.
One more tale.
Greet me with the words of my being, Dumelang.
And knowledge that looking upon
Me is seeing the face of divinity. Morena.
Singabantu.
Look once more and tell me what you see.
Ungumntu. Dimuntu.
I am.
Thank you so much. That was Kemoto by Buhle, Isang, and Lila. Now we have Shelley Berry's Womandla. Shelley Berry is an award-winning filmmaker born in the Eastern Cape. She graduated with her Masters of Fine Arts in Film from Temple University in Philadelphia in 2006, with funding from the Ford Foundation. Her films span across genres and are largely experimental in style. She often shoots her own films, exploring the aesthetics of cinematography from the perspective of a wheelchair user. Screenings of her work have been held at major festivals and events around the world and acquired by television, including MTV, DUTV, and WYBE in the US, SABC and ETV in South Africa. New York University is one of the international libraries that has purchased her work. Shelley developed the programming department at Cape Town TV, CTV, a community television station advocating human rights and social justice, where she was based as program manager from July 2008 and to January 2010. During this time, she also ran training workshops in filmmaking, particularly for those who have not had an opportunity to tell their stories. Shelley is the founder and director of Two Spinning Wheels, a production company that aims to explore new languages in cinema and marginalized voices, having access to the craft of filmmaking. She currently teaches film at the University of Johannesburg while working on her PhD at the Witwatersrand University. This is Womandla by Shelley Berry.
We rise from the blood of warrior women whose labor pains mark our history. Women fearlessly imprinting the earth with feet that stand firm in courage. We rise from African queens who balanced the sky on their heads, who roamed the lands, gathering sweet fruit to their breasts. We rise from dancers whose bodies have translated music, women who have called rain into being. We rise from nameless women whose stories were never documented by the writers of records, but who dared to pour their voice upon the wind and who were struck for saying too much. We rise from women who in 56 traveled with petitions declaring their demands for emancipation. Women who buried their families in 76, 85, and too many other years to count. We rise from women who scrubbed floors, eating leftovers from the privileged, but who could urinate, whisper flowers into bloom. We rise from women who raised us with hearts stitched with faith, women who have been thrown down in their homes, in the streets, in prisons, only to rise again, holding their fists to the sun. We rise from women who taught a nation that sent history in a different direction. You, brother, you, sister, you rise from women, invincible, powerful African women.
Wow. All right. Oh, that was, I need a moment. That was incredibly powerful. I'm taking deep breaths. All of these films were incredibly, incredibly, incredibly powerful. And there's a lot to take in here. And at the end of the breakout sessions, we'll have a more open session where we can engage in a Q&A and a discussion of the films, of Mmatshilo's talk, of everything that we're experiencing today. So with that, I would like for us to segue into our breakout sessions, and the conversation I'm inviting everybody to there as I send you all to your breakout sessions is couched or grounded in a quote by Mmatshilo Motsei, or rather inspired by a quote by Mmatshilo Motsei. And even a talk from Karnita Mohammed, who also speaks about this idea of the moment, right? And the quote goes, "I choose not to throw up my arms in desperation, asking the question, Baba, senzani, senzeni na, what have we done? Instead, I choose to raise my arms in gratitude, ready to receive the divine, feminist opportunities ushered in by the era of the moment." So the question we invite you to consider in the breakout sessions, which will lead you to now, is what does moment mean for us? What does this moment mean for us? as African feminists? What does this moment mean for us as African feminists? And now to your breakout sessions. Okay. I had set it up, but now it's not happening.
Oh, no, it's me. I'm a creepy human who just jumped in based on the Black Academic Caucus group. So I came to watch and see. No, I'm not creepy like that way. I mean, I wasn't registered, so I just came in last time, so I don't think I'm in a breakout session. So thank you, but I suppose, how long is the breakout session? Will I just wait for people to come back and get some feedback, or can I join later, say in like the next 20 minutes?
Yeah, I'm not sure why. Are they already open? I guess they're already open. Hold up. Are you the only one here?
Well, you and I, but yeah. Oh, as far as I can see.
Okay, let me assign you to a room.
Oh, hi. We have another human.
Okay, so the breakout sessions have started.
I have no idea.
I have no clue as well.
Yeah.
Hello. I said
We are all still here.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
breakout rooms.
How do we jump in?
I know. I set them up, and now it's
There are these breakout sessions. I don't know how it works. So that's why I'm asking them, how do we jump into the breakout sessions?
okay.
Yeah, I noticed.
But there's only hold up. There's
How do I change it?
only there's only 4 of us in here, right? Which means we're together in a breakout session.
There are 40 of
Oh.
us here.
All of us are here.
Everybody else is gone.
Looks like everybody's in.
Okay, that's fine. I'll
Yes.
sort it out. I will have to start a new set of breakout rooms. Ach, Jenne Machis, I thought this was actually okay.
I think we could just start sharing now.
Okay, let's just go ahead and do that.
Just start sharing. I think
but I guess
technology is also the divine telling us to like not go into our corners and to just share our feelings, because there are lots of feelings.
Okay.
Until no, please. No, my son.
Great.
Okay, so everybody share then. I don't know how to facilitate. Okay, what we can do is you can just raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can go ahead and speak. So we'll do it that way since the breakout situation didn't work out. Do I have any hands? Anyone? No one wants to talk about this moment?
Most of the session was very powerful. So I feel almost like the moment has just got me reflecting. You know, because it's really, really powerful. Like
Thank you, Carnita. Anyone else?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Faith.
Yes. Yeah, the moment for me, I'm in Finland. So it is.
Hi, Faith.
Hi. So I enjoyed the talk a lot, and even the videos that we have shown. But they also made me reflect on how I feel isolated in terms of not having that community I used to have in South Africa, and now you are in a place where you have people who are different from you in academic spaces and so forth. And with also even this coronavirus, people being quarantined in spaces, even feeling more isolated during that time. So I found I'm finding this discussion very very good, and even just healing just to be here and hear all this talk.
Thank you so much, Faith, all the way from Finland. Yeah, no, certainly isolation is truly an experience right now in this moment, and I'm glad that this could be a space of community for you. We have Waruna Siane has raised her hand. Waruna, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. Apologies, I can't show my screen because, I can't open the video because actually, yeah. Anyway, one thing that stood out for me, it's a couple of things that stood out for me about healing and revolution, around healing being reconciling what may seem irreconcilable, and how I carry the fractured masculine inside of me. I am still reflecting. I'm really not sure what that means for me, but I do understand it and I feel it and I live it. Yeah, so thank you for this. Thank you very much.
If I could jump in, I have no idea how to raise my hand because I'm technologically challenged. But can I just say that I actually got goosebumps. I had such a sense, because it has been such a, we speak of isolation, but this moment has been so incredibly isolating. I think that just the need to connect, and the need to connect beyond webinars that are telling us how we can still be great when we actually just are going through so much, how much have you written? How much are you getting on? All the how-to things about how to turn your kitchen table into like a home teaching space. But to actually just acknowledge, I feel like this moment is just also about acknowledging what's happening. So still processing what we've just experienced, but that is my reaction. Thank you.
Can you please have the original question that we were meant to reflect on again, maybe in the chat so we can see it?
Sorry, Fatima, what did you ask?
I asked, please, can we have the original question that we're supposed to take into the breakout groups? Maybe if that question can be put into the chat so we can just see it for our discussion.
Also, maybe a question as well to the community. How are people taking care of themselves? Because, as Paulo is saying, this has been an incredibly, basically a once in a century kind of situation. But of course, it's a once in a century situation that has, it shows up all the fractures in our society, in our lives. So how has everybody been managing and coping during this time, and taking care of self and loving self during this incredibly difficult moment, and staying sane as well. I mean, we had that kind of fun poll questions, um, but how is everybody coping and managing and staying sane during this time? Because we're also saying that, you know, the Zoom session is really wonderful. But how has everybody been taking care of self and each other during this time? So what's your coping mechanisms as well? Go for it, Lila.
I will unmute. Hi guys, I don't know if you can all hear me. I hope that I sound clear on everybody's side. Answering the question on how I've gone through this journey of this very strange space. Basically, I've had to learn how to do things like this, where I commune with others and share ideas with others using technology that I've never really tried using before. It's been a confusing and difficult journey, but it's been exciting as well to see that new media can keep us together in connecting us through our ideas. And that's why we find ourselves here with Motsei, sharing information and actually seeing that although we are far apart, our spirits seem to be moving towards the same angle, towards the same unity and the same understanding. And it's actually surprising to see that the three poems, the three pieces of media that were played, actually play into that theme so seamlessly to say the same thing, which means men and women in a way are becoming one voice. And I think that's what's been keeping my sanity through these hard times, is that my wife and I seem to resonate on the same wavelengths. And I think that will benefit my son, being a component, the key component in the future that we're building, that it will build him in a way where he's less damaged than what I was growing up with the misogyny and the gender norms that we had in our societies. I think we're building something that is really amazing at this point. And being grateful for that is how I've been keeping my sanity.
Thank you so much, Lila. Wow, keeping your sanity, engaging in questions, and really staying present. That's incredibly powerful. Also, I have shared the question. I've shared the question with everybody in the chat again. The quote as well as the question, but also Charlene's question about how have people been taking care of themselves in this moment is also a very important question. So please go ahead and continue to engage. And yeah, the chat is continuing. In the last 10 minutes of the chat, we were going to do a group, a post breakout session group conversation. So we have an added 10 minutes to this. So people, please feel free to converse with everybody. Again, share your hands if you want me to put you on screen. That will be really great. I feel alone here.
So I haven't put up my hand. So
that's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was really struck by Mmatshilo saying that, you know, revolution is not just, it's not just about like healing is not just about changing, it's changing into something new. And but also, you know, when she was talking about that period of solitude, and I was thinking, for like during this moment, so many of us have been isolated, but are we consciously transforming into something new? And what are we making of this period of isolation? And You know, Charlene, I don't know that. I think like most days one just, well, for me, you know, you just get by, and that the take, and I think what Mmatshilo has done so powerfully for me and that I was struck by was to say consciously work at your caring for yourself so that you move into someone that has some kind of healing. I think for many people it feels like we're drifting. There was a moment that was very powerful and very cohesive in some ways, but as the lockdown has continued and people have rushed back into the world in the most very bizarre ways, if the stillness that the lockdown has been terrifying. And I'm wondering if a lot of that has been about a retreat from the possibility of healing, a retreat from what that possibility of what solitude and being separate in some ways so that we can hear ourselves in the way that Mmatshilo so powerfully conveyed. If a lot of that rush back into the world has been about, you know, not wanting to apart from the economic factors and other things, of course, but not actually wanting to do that work of having to be still, and been wondering how guilty I've been of that. Well, not guilty as much as what are other routes towards finding a way to hearing that voice in the midst of the world continuing without the lockdown, I guess.
Thank you so much for that. I love Kanita, how you brought back the idea of like the coming into new skin, coming into new form, that this forced this moment of being forced indoors, right? This moment of being forced into our homes, of being held down almost into our homes, is in some sense also, is it in some sense also an invitation to come into ourselves intentionally and deliberately so that we can transform into the new skins that are necessary for this new normal that we all like emerging into, so we can transmute the energy of wounding and the energy of strife that has so much that is so present in a lot of our lives, and then kind of like emerge into something new. So thank you so much for bringing that back. Do we have any other hands? We have a hand clap from Tana Pistorius. Malika Ndlovu, go ahead and unmute yourself and start your video. Malika?
Hello, everyone. I would prefer if I don't come on screen today. But I'm just wanting to express such gratitude for being present. Today we had a Zoom burial service for our sister poet, Maisha Jenkins. And as many people have experienced during this time, there is this extraordinary stretch of being forced to be apart. At times we would want to be together, and at the same time understanding that processes like grief and loss and entering the unknown that Sis Mmatshilo was saying so much about, the death of old versions of yourself or patterns of behavior that no longer serve you, or things that just turned out to be impotent ways of behaving after the lockdown extended and you realized something fundamentally had to be surrendered. And I'm just really resonating with so much that I've heard and wanting to express the gratitude for being able to receive the gift of conversations like this that have been set, the tone has already been set for this level of vulnerability and generosity, for the embrace of male voices, for the encounter with the masculine that isn't combative, for even the recognition in the last person's comment about, or before Conita, about what we are building. Because even if we may not feel we yet have the energy or capacity to build anything new, we're still trying to figure out who are we now and where are we now. But parenting is a fundamental part that has also been deeply impacted by this lockdown, and the ways in which we relate to being forced to be together, whether that's the homeschooling thing or just figuring out what new world are our children entering, or they're lost in the turbulence of crazy schooling scenarios, of threat, of change, of uncertainty for everyone in education. So pretty much the only thing that's constant is change, and that is terrifying for most people. And when you add grief or triggered trauma to that, I'm literally grateful that I have isolation or containment or insulation from the norm that many of us have had before, of the pressure to be out there delivering, engaging, facilitating, leading, speaking, being on a public platform. So I really value also that it's been acknowledged in this group that there are gifts that are coming from this that we can sometimes label a loss or an incarceration, but it's a rebirth in many ways, going back into a womb so that the rebirth is for another way that can only be revealed by listening. And so thank you, Conita, also for that, for the self-reflection of saying, is this what I'm doing when I rush to be out there, or where I may feel a little guilty that I'm not doing A, B, C, D in the show me what you've done videos kind of world, or other people moving forward. That's a lot of words, but it's a spontaneous flow, and thank you. It's full of gratitude.
Thank you, Malika. It's all the words we needed to hear and need to continue sitting with. Thank you so much. And gratitude to Maisha Jenkins, the poet whom you just mentioned right now, and for her gift and her life. Guyakanya. There's a conversation going on in the chat that I think I would like to invite into the open stage, a conversation about the border between solitude and loneliness. And there's an earlier question also that I want to bring to the fore, which was directed at Mmatshilo, which is one about, does the work of Conversations with Our Womb ever fail? Does the experience of entering back into our own trauma, can the womb fight its inability to carry life or expel it? That's how the question is written. So if Mmatshilo is open to responding to that one, and if anyone is open to expanding as well on that the question of the kind of like fine line between solitude and loneliness, especially, and isolation at a time such as this, and what is possible and what can happen, and what do we do with the fact of lonely at a time of solitude. Yeah.
Okay, I can respond to the question. Does the work ever fail? Yes. Failure is another it's another aspect of my work that I really love. I mean, last week I was doing a lecture on failure as an option. That when you fail, and we fail all the time. When you fail, how you react is based on your conception of failure, what failure means to you. There's a difference between saying, I have failed so many times and I'm a failure. So in my focus in terms of working with failure, the idea is not to own failure as your identity. Failure is a process, you know, that you go through. So when you fail, you know that it's a process. And the womb and its inability or its refusal to carry life, most definitely. There's someone I'm working with now who has gone through miscarriage. And again, the issue is, what are your thoughts and beliefs about whatever it is that you are going through? Because most of the time, the angst, if we experience angst, is based on our thoughts and beliefs about what we are going through. So when we were talking, one of the things that I suggested to her in meditation is to access the spirit that came through her, that was in her for a very short space of time. Because in a sense, I feel that we all have a capacity to access the spiritual world. And if we allow ourselves, we can heal, the healer within. And my focus most of the time in my work is that my role is not to heal people. My role is to help people to invoke the healer inside of them. So she and I have agreed that we'll get a circle of close friends, women, and go and do a water ritual. And this also steps into what Warona is talking about. I think because we are social beings, and if you look at history as Africans, we have survived politically, economically, socially, spiritually. We have survived as a collective. And now, and the collective for us is physical contact. And now that we no longer have that physical contact, we feel lost, we feel alone. And so I guess we have to find other ways of creating that collective, that even if we are not with it physically, we feel that we still have it. But if we don't have it, because there's a lot of people who have been locked down alone, they don't speak to anyone, they don't have anyone to chat to, and every time when I come to that point, I go back to where I was for 2 years, and essentially I usually joke to my kids that I was locked down for 2 years, and in that 2 years when I didn't have access to anyone and I was in isolation and I was locked down. At first, it was a major battle. I got into a depression and, you know, but over time, the depression and the crying had to stop because I was in a situation that forced me to go deep inside myself. And so the womb may refuse to carry life for reasons that we don't know, that we don't understand. In situations where something happens and we don't have a logical understanding of it, I find that for me, acceptance helps. Because most of the time you might end up just cracking yourself up, wanting a logical answer, you know, to a question. But I think loneliness as well. loneliness, we carry a lot of loneliness, we carry a lot of sadness at the moment, and there's a lot of depression. And also the conception out there is that depression is bad. You are sick, you are ill, your sadness is not allowed, you need to be happy, and all of that. So for me, what helps is allowance, you know, following the law of allowance. If I'm feeling down, just accepting that I'm feeling down today. And if I'm feeling sad, I allow myself to be sad, even when I don't understand why I'm sad. I mean, there's been moments during lockdown where we have a fancy word for it. We say that we have cabin fever, when in fact what we really mean is that we are meeting ourselves, and it's about scary because the best way that we have survived as Africans is survived in a collective and in physical contact. And I liked what Lila was saying as well. I think what I took from what he was saying is the issue of gratitude for small things. I think because for me, I have been through a process where I know what it's like to live with nothing. And so gratitude comes to me quite naturally. And I'm aware of a whole lot of things to be grateful for, even when I'm depressed. Not that you have to be gratitude and then suppress your depression. I think for me, as I said in my talk, it's not either or. You can be depressed. You can allow yourself to be depressed and be sad, but still be grateful for what you have, because that gratitude is the ray of light that carries you from one day to another.
Thank you so much, Mmatshilo, for holding those two questions and reflecting again powerfully. Thank you very much. Now I'm closing off our Q&A session, and I just want to say thank you to everybody for participating in our non-breakout rooms breakout. I think it worked better this way, actually. I loved I think we all benefited from hearing from all the different people who spoke: Shelley, Lila, Carnita, Malika, Mmatshilo, the conversation in the chat that spilled over into the larger setting, the main room. Thank you all so much. And if I've missed anybody, I'm really sorry. I did dip out for a second. So thank you all so much for all the ways in which you engaged in this moment. And Malika, you brought us into a reminder of Maisha Jenkins, who's also a poet, civil rights activist, feminist, and revolutionary woman. And I don't want to miss this opportunity to share one of the most powerful poems and pieces of hers that I know, and that Impepo Press, in fact, shared on their page the other day. So I'm going to read that as I segue into our wind down. And just for all of us to just take a moment and just be with everything that was said today, things about transmuting, things about transforming, coming into new skin, revolution as being present, allowing, accepting all our fractured parts, as well as really going into the space of solitude, of loneliness, of being alone with ourselves, and doing the work of healing our mother wounds, our wounds, and holding presence to all the kind of gendered bodies and gendered ideologies and gendered histories that we all exhibit, so that in that work of integration, we can move forward in what is next in every moment for us. Maisha Jenkins, Flight. Who I was is not who I am, and who I am is not who I will be. Some bits falling off, other parts sprouting. Inside of this cocoon, I dream of flight. May we all continue to bloom in all the ways we need to. Thank you. Now I invite you to please go to your fridge, grab your drinks, and let's have a feminist wind down to close off Afems Virtual with Mmatshilo Motsei. And before we do that, actually, let me stop sharing. I would like for all of the people who are open to showing up on video or even just off video to give a big hand to Mmatshilo Motsei for joining us today and for giving us the gift of a conversation with our wombs. Let's also thank Thank you. Can we also thank Shelley Berry, Jaliya the bird, Isang, Buhle, and Philiswa for their videos. My God. Oh yeah, you can't hear. This is more fitting. Thank you all so much. And give yourself a hand clap for being here and for staying present throughout. Wonderful. All right, I am imagining you are as ready as I am for the ultimate feminist wind down. I'm gonna give you 2 minutes. Well, yeah, 2 minutes. That's a lot of time. 2 minutes to go and grab your wine and let's get to it.